Hi, this is Jackie here with the Sexy Politico. I'm here with Dr. Debra Blaine. Dr. Blaine here was a practicing physician for over 30 years. And while looking at the changes that patients had to deal with, she then used this knowledge to write 3 books. And you know what, Debra, can you tell us a little bit more about your books and about everything you've gone through? Because you can tell it better than I can.
Well, I love to talk about my books. It's my new passion. So I started writing books in response to the horrible conditions I felt like doctors work under, and I wanted to be able to let the public know what it's like and why they've lost so much in that doctor-patient relationship and how we hate it too. But I didn't want it to be, it couldn't be a nonfiction because then I would be liable and I didn't want to get sued and, all that kind of stuff. So I made
Yeah.
it a fiction. So it became a medical thriller. And that was just so much fun. It was just, the Russian oligarchs hack our electronic medical records and they extort millions of dollars and then they murder their patients or murder the patients. So I discovered I really liked writing the thriller, and I liked telling stories about real life critical issues in a format that was entertaining. So, because I felt like at that time, especially, and I guess it hasn't really stopped, that there's just so many platforms for people to jump on now, and especially a couple of years ago, it was like, oh, you gotta, petition for this and march for this and donate for this and it's just it got to be so much. It was like, how can I bring up another subject for people to get, all excited and about and say, like I just felt I was exhausted. And I imagined that people who were most like me, which I'm hoping is a large percentage of the population because I'm very moderate, would be exhausted too.
I am.
So if I put it in a book, it becomes not threatening. It's a story. You can relate to it or not relate to it. You can just enjoy it as entertainment. Hopefully they're entertaining. I've been told they are. Or you can say, oh, I get that. That's a problem. Or you can just ignore it and say, oh, what an interesting story. I wonder if that might ever happen, or that could never happen. So it just seemed more, it was just more inviting for me. But then I discovered I loved writing the thriller part. And the thing that was really bothering me next was the extremism in this country. And so I wrote this book. Since you're, if this is the first one. It's called Code Blue, the other end of the stethoscope, and it's about what's happened to the medical field. This is Undue Influences, and this one is about how. So it postulates the story that the American population is being drugged and brainwashed, and that's why people have become so extreme.
It
So
feels that
until
way.
it does seem to me to be that way, because people, I feel like there's a large faction on both sides of the political aisle that seem to be not thinking things through and just reacting. And so I have all kinds of theories about that. But I wrote this story, and it's about a family and one man who is actually immune to this drug and goes in to explain why, and him trying to, shake his wife out of the clutches and to just sort of explain that you have to think things out for yourself. You can't just accept what other people say. Everybody else has an agenda that's not your agenda, and how this happens and what where it comes from. It comes from the marketing, the whole marketing sphere. People who are trying to sell you something or trying to get you to behave in a certain way. It's usually to give other people money or power.
Yeah.
It's almost never about your good because they don't even know you.
Hmm.
And so I wrote that story. I really enjoyed writing that book, and I tried to present both sides of the issues, which a few people told me that I really didn't take sides. I didn't call because I'm not, I'm sort of left of center politically. I'm not, I wouldn't call myself a liberal or a Democrat, and I wouldn't call myself a conservative or a Republican, certainly not these days. um,
You
the
just label yourself that, and it just puts this whole entire call sheet of what it means to be that onto yourself. and
That's
some
exactly what happens. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, I feel like that's what happens is just, we have this human need to be connected. We have a very human need for community, but somehow that gets confused somehow with the need for conformity. And
mm-hmm.
we don't we don't need to conform. But people, there's a lot of people who believe that, or who feel in their hearts that in order to be accepted, they have to be the same. And if you're not the same as me, I don't accept you. And so that's, and I personally, I think that comes from people not spending enough time with themselves, not knowing who they are, not being comfortable with who they are. Because when you're comfortable in your own skin and somebody else comes along in another skin, it doesn't threaten you.
I blame this.
It's a lot of that.
I blame this and all of the apps attached to that, because you're just mindlessly scrolling and looking at other people's lives and looking what it means. You're like, oh well, I think that's bad, so then what else does this person care about? Oh well, I must do that because that's what this person who seems to have this gen, I want to be like that person. That person doesn't know you or care about you or anything of that nature.
That's exactly right. They say that you become like the 5 people you spend most of your time with. And if the people you spend most of, or if the thing that you spend most of your time with is this, then you're becoming like that. I mean, our society, I feel like, is very attention deficient. Like we could all use, a little bit of Adderall sprinkled in the water.
I think
Or something.
honestly, we could all just use a Wi-Fi blocker.
Yeah.
I think we could all just use a Wi-Fi blocker, because they used to make fun of us when we were in, well, okay, when people my age were in college and we were just texting our friends, but at least we were texting people that we knew.
Right.
And
And
we
now
were
you don't know
texting
who you're
like,
texting.
hey, let's go to the mall and get a pretzel. And, and then you would go to the mall and get a pretzel. But now you're messaging people that you may or may not know, and you're not going anywhere. And it's not the pandemic's fault anymore.
Right. Right.
But
I remember when the punishment for my son, when he was not paying attention to me, we were looking at colleges. I hope he doesn't hear this this podcast. So we went up looking at colleges. We were in Connecticut, and no, it was Rhode Island, I think. And he was texting under the table, and it was a clear table, but the menu was on top. And I didn't realize what he was doing. And then when the waiter came and took the menus and I saw it, and I was like, we're supposed to be spending time together. I'm up here, we're looking at colleges. It's for you. We're up here for you, and I told him, you do it again and I'm gonna cancel your texting. And of course he did it again, and I stopped it, I shut his texting off for a couple of days. He was furious. Oh my God. But does he still do it? Yeah, I mean, it's like
yeah,
not even, well, he's 31 now. He can do whatever he wants, but it's like proper etiquette now is not to call someone. It's to text them and see, can you talk? And that has advantages in some cases, but it's taken to such a degree that, some people get offended if you just call them out of the blue. I mean, so don't pick up the phone.
they
Don't pick up the phone
do.
then.
They really do. And I mean, yes, I have small children. I would like a text, but I would like a text after 7:30, just so that I can go to another room that's far, far away from my children and not wake them up. But I mean, if you call me at 4:30 in the afternoon, I'll pick up the phone and be like, I can't talk.
Can I call
And
you
that's
back?
fine.
Yeah, like a normal, and it's like people have this sense that, and I shouldn't keep saying people, because some people have this sense of, if they get a text, they have to answer it immediately. If they get a phone call, they have to answer it immediately. I could be walking into a patient's office, because I still work very part-time, and I can tell her that she has COVID, and she'll get all upset, and then she's not looking at me anymore. She's texting. Like, can we finish our conversation? And she's texting her boss. She's not even texting her husband. Like, it's just like, okay, like, can we just finish for 5 minutes so I can see all the hundreds of other people that are out there waiting, or do we all have to wait for you to finish your text? It's just, I don't know. We've strayed far from the social niceties that we used to have. I mean, there was a proper etiquette, there was a way to behave around other people, and it was, maybe annoying sometimes, but it served the purpose of keeping us all civilized. And I think there's a loss of a lot of that.
I honestly, I think after having kids, and it's really weird how different people react to the fact that I ask my kids to say Mr. and Mrs. so and so, and they're like, I'm not Mr. so and so, just call me George. And I'm like, my 4-year-old is not going to call you George. You're Mr. George then.
Respect, there's no such, respect is
It's like,
gone.
my kid is going to respect you. You are a grown person.
Yeah.
Which, luckily enough, my husband's side of the family, everybody's auntie and uncle, which became a problem when we were getting married, and I didn't and I'm like, do you have 35 aunts and uncles? He's like, no. Because that's not my culture.
But then, so we used to do that a little bit. So I'm a little bit older than you. It was a way of being respectful but familiar.
Yeah, it's like your mom's best friend or your dad's best friend. That's those sorts of people.
Right.
And then it was like, oh, here's Auntie Sue. My husband is 100% Chinese and this woman's Black. And I'm like, okay, we need to have a talk, because
hey, listen, it could happen. It could happen.
He's so Chinese that 23andMe laughed at him.
So this book, Undue Influences,
let's
very very personal story of this family. So it opens up, there's this kid Joshua, who's the protagonist's nephew, speaking of aunts and uncles, and he stumbles into his uncle's New York City office on 6th Avenue, and he doesn't remember anything about where he's been or what's happened in the last 3 days, and he's covered in blood.
Jeez.
And he gets taken to the hospital. None of the blood is his. And so that kind of thrusts the uncle into like, what happened to my nephew? And he gets, he's trying to keep the police away from his nephew until they can figure it out. And, was there a crime? And they want to arrest him. What are you arresting him for? Where's the crime? Where's the victim? Nobody knows. But he starts to find out that there's this brainwashing thing going on where people don't even know. It just so happens that they made a mistake with Joshua, and he wasn't supposed to kind of come out of this the way he did, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time to begin with. So Russell, who is immune to this drug for reasons that come out, is now trying to figure it all out. Not only is he immune, but he's able to kind of reverse the process a little bit with Joshua, and that makes him very special to the government, the NSA, the conservatives on the one hand, and the liberals on the other hand. So if he, in particular, the government wants to use him as an asset, because apparently we're not the only one in the story. We're not the only ones using these kinds of manipulative techniques.
Right.
But if he won't help out, then he becomes a liability and he has to die. So,
of course, that's how.
Right. And so the president at that time is Ganoff. His name is Ganoff. And so it's the GGP, the Great Ganoff Party, and it kind of goes from there. And the third book, I'm working on a science fiction series now, which is different. But this is the third book, Beyond the Pillars of Salt, which is kind of a possible natural progression of a world like Undue Influences, where the government becomes a dictatorship. There are no free or fair elections anymore. The earth is violently reclaiming herself. And there are volcanoes everywhere, storms. Life is becoming less and less viable on this planet. And what do? And so Russell and some of the characters from the previous novel find a way to survive. And so it's become sort of a little bit of, it's more of a hard science fiction, but it's science fiction, but it's a dystopian fiction.
Right. So if we were going to, so in this day and age, how do we how why is it that we are discouraged from actually evaluating information from different political platforms or other things of that nature? I mean, I'm sitting here being fed things to buy my kids constantly on social media, but nobody gives me any information of why it's good or bad. It's just so and so uses it.
Because the companies that are showing you that, they want to, so marketing has become so much the priority because people need to make money, which is that's a given, but people want, I call it the addiction to more. And I think it's our greatest illness right now on this planet. It's not the COVID pandemic or the opiate epidemic, but it's the addiction to more. Everybody wants more, 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 more. And so the people who market to us, they know what works, they know what sells, and so they cater to it. And our society's been sort of brainwashed in hopefully not with drugs, but I don't know if it matters, to want convenience, to expect. We have very unrealistic expectations that the culture is trying to keep up with. So to expect convenience and to expect high fashion and to expect excess, and none of those things are real,
Yeah.
like that's, so that's, I think, one of the things that's happening in the medical profession is, you're supposed to be in and out from your urgent care appointment in an hour. Well, it's not necessarily going to happen,
Yeah,
and when it
I was
doesn't
scheduled
happen.
for 15-minute OB, not the whichever doctor it is, that OB, yeah, that
Yeah.
when I was having my son last year, and I'm sitting there going, why is it only 15 minutes?
Well, because they have to see
I
four
mean,
patients
some
in
of
an
them are
hour.
short, some of them aren't really important, but there are certain appointments that I'm like, I think I deserve longer than 15 minutes.
Well, so they're supposed to schedule you according to how what kind of a visit it is. But then the doctors end up getting double booked. Doctors are penalized if they don't see a certain number of patients per day or per hour, if they don't do a certain number of procedures, if they don't get good scores. So you, the patient, has been transmuted into a customer. You're not a patient anymore. You're a consumer of healthcare. And as a consumer of healthcare, you are supposed to get convenience, and you're supposed to get exactly what you want when you want it, as if you were out there buying an Apple TV, in which case you're perfectly, it's perfectly legitimate to say, no, I don't want this TV, I want that TV, because you're paying for it. But in this
Yes.
case, if you have a medical issue, it might not be even in your best interest to say, I want this treatment, not that treatment. So there's just, it's sort of worked into the system that patients are not patients anymore, and they're not even as a consumer is not even human anymore. It's kind of it just it represents a figure in a process, not necessarily a figure that has feelings, needs, legitimate wants. But and what's happened is, there's been a reaction, and so a lot of patients are very demanding. And because they feel something's missing, we feel something's missing, and so they're trying to get that back, and it's really hard to do that.
I mean, I never felt more unhuman than when I was pregnant with my second child,
I'm
because I
so
just
sorry.
felt like I was no all it they would walk in and they're like 37-year-old geriatric pregnancy. Like they would use the word geriatric pregnancy to my face, and I'm like, not that old, man.
Yeah.
Not that old. I'm 37.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially now. I mean, women
and
have
they're
babies
they're
into
like
their 40s.
overweight geriatric pregnancy with a large, and I'm like, I have big kids, man. I have big kids, and I'm a big person to start with.
That's,
And I'm just like, they just name all these things that are negative, and then they're like, okay, you need this test, this test, this test, and this test. Nobody would tell me what it was for or why. And I would ask, and they're like, I had to Google stuff. Why should I have to Google when I pay for a doctor?
that's
Don't
terrible.
don't you go to medical school to be able to say stuff in layman's terms?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't explain what you're doing, you don't really know what you're doing. You're just going from a template. If this, then this, if this, then this, you should
Yeah.
be able to talk to someone. I mean, we used to do that. So I've lived through, over 3 decades of medicine, and I've watched it deteriorate, and it's a mess.
No, I think the worst thing was when I had my C-section and it was scheduled. And the doctor says to me, "Now tell me if it hurts." And I'm like, "It hurts. It hurts." No, no, it really hurts. And the doctor's like, "No, it doesn't hurt. That's just pressure." I'm like, "No, no, it hurts." And the doctor looks at my husband and says, "Tell your wife that this doesn't hurt." And he's like,
I'm not going to do any such thing, right?
he's like, he's like, "First of all, I don't know her body. And second of all, I want to stay married."
That's funny.
No, and then I passed out from the pain and woke up and there my son was there. But still, it was just like,
Yeah, the human side is definitely missing, and it's not because, for most doctors, it's not because we don't want to provide that. It's because there's so much pressure from so many different directions that
yeah, they probably weren't allowed to have more than 10 minutes in there for me to get my C-section, or however long it actually took, because I passed out. So I don't know how long I was there.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you went through that.
But so what do you think we could do to encourage people to evaluate information that they receive more or better?
So, I think it's important to try to look at where the information came from and what the motivation of that provider of information was. What is their underlying agenda? If it's an advertiser, well, right off the bat that their agenda is to make money. So are they being honest with you or not? They might be. I mean, it could be absolutely completely on the up and up, but I think everything should be evaluated. When you hear a political statement and it's coming from your party, you should still evaluate it. Just because if you're a Democrat and it's the Democrats who are saying this, doesn't mean you have to agree with everything the Democrats say. And the same about the Republicans. You don't have to agree with everything the Republicans say. And to understand that there's nuance in the world, that you can't, you can be against abortion and still pro-choice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like what's being encouraged is sort of dumbing down the population. No, just choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And then you can belong somewhere. But that's not the world that we really live in. It's not accurate. And if somebody starts telling you about, some issue that you don't know anything about, come with me, march this and do this and let's, go out there and protest. And, it's okay to say, I don't have an opinion about that yet. I haven't thought about it. There's a million things coming at me all the time, and I don't know what I think about that. I haven't had a chance to research it. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. And you don't have to agree with people. That doesn't mean you have to disagree with them either. You can just say, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know does not equate to I disagree with you and I'm just trying to be nice about it. I don't know means I don't know. But this reminds me of when I have a degree in history, and one of the first things you're taught in your early history classes is that people think that history is unbiased, when in reality history has a bias, that everything is true, but it depends on what point of view the history book is being written from. Who wrote this source? And once you realize that as a historian, that every first person account has a point of view and has an agenda, even if it's just some 12-year-old girl's diary talking about what she did and who she had a crush on, then you can really think about whose history is being told and whose history is not being told.
Right.
And people don't think about it in that way.
There's a line in this book that says one of the characters says to his wife, I just want to be on the right side of history. And she kind of whispers, that depends on who's writing the history. And you write it a little different and all of a sudden you think you're on the right side and now you're on the wrong side. So
yeah,
I mean, and okay, so even when we get the news it used to be as best as was possible and accurate, just the facts,
Yeah.
and both sides. So there was a thing called the fairness doctrine, and it came about in the late 40s, but it was
Yes.
abolished in the late 80s. And the
Yes.
fairness doctrine said that if you wanted to maintain your license as a journalist, you were obligated to report both sides of an issue, unless it was an opinion. And so you would hear both sides. You would hear one side did this, the other side did this, and you would draw your own conclusion. But then they abolished that, and now people, what we hear is only what that particular broadcast
Station. Yeah.
station, whatever, wants you to hear. And when you go online, or if you're looking for something on Google, or what you get thrown, or on social media, the ads that you get will represent what the algorithm thinks is your opinion. So you only look at things that it thinks you will agree with.
Right. And
You
it's
don't see
really
the
hard
other
to just
side.
go, what happened? And that's, and trying to teach people, okay, do you want to know what that Supreme Court decision said? Hey, look, here's SCOTUS.org. Go to
Look at it
SCOTUS,
and
and
read
they
it,
usually have a front page that will tell you the gist. You don't have to read all 50 pages of the
Right.
decision. They'll tell you this is what was decided. This is the thrust of history that will happen from it. And if you want to read the specifics of every dissenting justice's opinion, you can do that. But this is the facts that you need to know. Go to whitehouse.gov. Even though that can sometimes be very that can be partisan as well, but usually you'll get slightly less partisan facts if you go straight to the
That's the hope.
source. But no, I don't think people know how to research.
People don't know that they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know that there's research that should be done. They don't know not just how to research, but that it doesn't cross their mind that maybe they should find out more information. Too often, it doesn't cross their mind.
Or people are lying.
They're lying, and then sometimes they're lying to themselves after a while as well. And it's just, like I said, I think it's become a question of like conforming. There's a certain mob mentality that comes out of it. I mean, some of that faction of the Republican, the cultists, I don't want to get too political, is just, I don't understand. These are thinking, intelligent people. But you know what? There's a whole faction on the other side, the extreme liberal Democrats, that I'm like, what are they doing? Like, it's, and it's all sort of rah, rah, and jump on board. And people do that. It's like, oh, wow, let's do that. It's exciting. It's an activity. And before you
After
know it,
COVID, activities sound great.
yeah, but this was even before COVID. So, and it breaks up families, it breaks up communities. People stop listening to the other side. They're afraid to hear. If I'm afraid to hear what you have to say, if I think you might disagree with me, and I can't even entertain why. So, I used to be on the board of my synagogue for like 9 years. And every once in a while, somebody would come on the board, and I would think, oh, I just I don't want to deal with that person. They're going to be, it's not I know they're just difficult. I don't agree with them most of the time. And invariably, I would come to realize, I mean, we all became friends anyway after a little bit, but invariably I would realize that, no, that person needs to be on the board because they have another point of view that I need to listen to. And if there wasn't anybody who was speaking that point of view, it would never cross my mind to consider it. And if that person is saying it, there's other people in the congregation who are thinking it. Now, it doesn't always mean that they're going to get their way or they're going to change my mind. And, but it was just the idea that, we need to hear from everyone. And it's only when we're afraid that we won't, we're going to lose something. What are we going to lose? What are you going to lose by listening to another person's point of view? What could you possibly lose by just listening? Well, people build their identities around they're being entrenched in a certain way of thinking. And if they let in another side, then, well, who am I then? And that's scary.
Yeah.
It's really frightening if that's the, you know, if that's how you've really built yourself and what you're using to hold yourself together. And I think, you know, we need to spend a little more time just with ourselves, just relax, just sort of, you know, take a walk in the neighborhoods, just like look at the trees, just, I know that sounds really crazy, but, you know, just say, okay, how much of this is really important? How important is it? What is really important in my life? My family's important. My cats are part of my family. They're really important. Having a place to live is important. You know, being in touch with my feelings, with nature, being able to be there for my friends. You know, is it really important if I think that this blue sweater is the greatest fashion of today? No, I don't care. It doesn't really matter, you know, but it can matter so much in some cases. Like, I have to have that one because everybody's wearing it. Like, okay.
Now, somebody made a comment that my 4-year-old got at my microphone and poked holes in it with either scissors or a pencil, and they're like, "Oh, when are you going to replace that?"
Does it work?
Yeah, that was my first question. I'm like, "Does it still work? Let me test this on somebody I know." Okay, it still works. I don't sound like an idiot. Cool.
Well, and especially in this, if you hadn't shown it to me, I would never have seen it.
Exactly.
Nobody would know, right?
Yeah. But anyway, before we get going, because Zoom now has a time limit, where can people find your books? And also, do you have any last statement that you would like to leave my audience with?
So everything about me is on my website, debrablaine.com. My books are on Amazon. If you look up Debra Blaine books, I republished 2 of the books, so you got to go with the cooler covers.
Ooh.
You'll know which ones they are. And parting words is, you know, there's just so much more richness in life when we get to know ourselves, and we have so much more to give each other and our family when we're not trying to be something that we think is cool. Just, you know, whatever you find when you look inside is going to be great. It's going to be better than what you're trying to plaster on yourself to look like others. So I would just say relax.
I feel like I needed to hear that. I hope somebody else needed to hear that as well. Well, maybe I don't hope they needed to hear it, but that they heard it.
But if they did need to hear it, that they heard it.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah. But thank you so much for being on the Sexy Politico. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Okay. Thank you. All of Debra's links, information, where to buy her books, anything will be in the show notes down below. We will be posting this. We'll be posting weekly from now until the end of February, when I take a little bit of a break. Thank you so much for being on the show, and have a great day.
Can I add
Bye.
one more thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I completely forgot to mention. So I'm also a coach.
Okay.
I'm a life coach, and I also coach like disenchanted doctors and professionals, but I'm also coaching writers now at all stages. And I have a little publishing practice, which is really a coaching practice that helps writers self-publish, pain-free and minimal expense to the writer, and they get 100% of their royalties. So if anybody's interested in that, also, you can find that on my website.
All right. Wonderful. Because
Thank you.
I've thought about that myself at some point. Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.